Tonight, on The Sleep Scientist, we drift into a dream unlike any other, a dream that floats gently above the clouds. Welcome to the Cloud Garden, a place where forests bloom in midair, stars whisper stories into the breeze, and lost memories find their way home. This is the tale of a girl named Mara, who wandered into the sky, not by wings, but by wonder. She was searching for answers, but what she found was something far greater, a garden that healed her, trees that remembered, and clouds that sang lullabies. Through shimmering rivers of mist and hidden chambers of ancient light, she learned to listen, to rest, and to trust the quiet path ahead. If your day has been long, or your mind feels full, this story was written for you. So take a slow breath. Let your body grow still. And imagine a staircase made of moonlight, leading to a place where the sky itself dreams. Don't worry about following every word. Let them drift by, like clouds across your thoughts. You're safe here. You're home here. And sleep is just a story away. The garden above the sky. In the quietest corner of the world, where no roads led and no maps reached, there floated a garden in the sky. Not in a city, not on a hill, but gently drifting, far above the clouds, like a secret the earth whispered to the stars. It was called the Cloud Garden. No one knew who had made it. There were no walls, no gates, no signs. Just soft white mist, curling around leaves that shimmered like silver lace. Trees swayed as if they were humming in their sleep, and vines hung lazily in the air as if time had slowed down just for them. And somewhere among the floating mosses and flowering branches, was a small house made of glass. Inside that house lived Dr. Mara Ellen, a sleep scientist. She wasn't like other scientists. She didn't chase answers, she listened to dreams. Each evening, just before the stars opened their eyes, she stepped out onto her floating porch with a notebook in hand and a blanket around her shoulders. The garden spoke in rustles, and Mara wrote them down. Some dreams came from the wind. Some from the trees. And some, from faraway sleepers who didn't even know they were dreaming aloud. That night, the air was especially still. As Mara settled into her soft chair made of woven starlight thread, she whispered, "I wonder whose dream will find me tonight." And just then, a petal floated by. But this one wasn't from her garden. It was golden. Glowing. And pulsing gently, like it was breathing. Mara sat upright. "You're not from here," she said softly. "Are you lost? Or, are you leading me somewhere?" She tucked the glowing petal into her notebook, heart beating quietly in her chest. The dream was beginning. And somewhere deep in the garden, a new path had opened, one she had never noticed before. The path of petals. The floating path hadn't been there yesterday. It shimmered like morning dew on glass, thin, delicate, and barely visible unless you tilted your head just right. It stretched from the edge of Dr. Mara Ellen's glass porch and wound gently through the garden, where clouds curled around trees like scarves and blossoms glowed softly in the dusk light. The golden petal still rested inside Mara's notebook, tucked between pages filled with sleepy scribbles and dream fragments. She placed a bookmark, a silver feather, between the sheets and stood up slowly. Her soft shoes made no sound on the glass floor. The night air was cool and sweet, and the only sound was the occasional rustle of a leaf brushing against mist. As she stepped onto the new path, it welcomed her like an old friend. It didn't feel like walking, it felt like drifting, like being carried by an invisible wind. With every step, tiny sparks of golden light flickered around her feet. Mara looked up. The sky above was clear, filled with stars that blinked slowly, as if they were falling asleep themselves. The garden was always peaceful, but tonight, it felt like it was holding its breath. Waiting. After a while, she reached a place she had never seen before. A clearing in the garden, round and quiet, where the trees grew in a perfect circle. In the center was something unexpected, a wooden bench, worn and warm-looking, as if many dreamers had sat there before her. But no one ever came to the Cloud Garden. No one but Mara. So how had this bench come to be? She sat down, hands in her lap, and looked around. The air was still. A faint hum, like a lullaby sung by the stars, moved through the trees. Then the golden petal in her notebook began to glow again. It rose slowly into the air, hovering above her lap. A gentle wind stirred, and the trees whispered something she could almost understand. Then, just for a moment, she heard it. A child's voice. Soft. Curious. Are you still listening? Mara's breath caught. She sat perfectly still. The voice faded like a memory, and the golden petal settled onto the bench beside her. The dream wasn't just hers anymore. Someone, somewhere, was trying to find their way back. The voice in the leaves. Dr. Mara Ellen sat still on the wooden bench, her hands gently resting in her lap, as the golden petal beside her gave off a soft, slow glow, like the rhythm of a sleeping heart. All around her, the cloud garden breathed. Vines hung like sleepy arms over tree branches. Petals drifted down through the mist like slow snow. The entire garden swayed gently, as if rocked by a lullaby only the stars could hear. But Mara's eyes weren't on the garden anymore. They were turned inward, toward the echo of that voice. A child's voice. Are you still listening? The words had floated into her mind so gently, so clearly, they had felt real. Not like the usual murmurs of dreams or the fading whispers of memory. This voice had intention. It was calling to her. She closed her eyes. Breathed in the cool mist. Her hands, though aged and lined with years of scribbling theories, notes, and dream records, trembled slightly. She had never heard a voice so clearly within a dream before. Not in the cloud garden. Not in any dream. She reached into her notebook and pulled out the page where the golden petal had been tucked. The ink on the paper shimmered faintly, words she didn't remember writing. The dreamer is young. But lost. The voice travels through clouds, looking for something it doesn't remember. Mara ran her fingers over the words. Her heartbeat slowed. Her mind stilled. She looked up. The garden was changing. Slowly, quietly, the mist was thickening in front of her, folding itself into a shape. Not solid, but shimmering. A figure, small, like a child made of moonlight and shadows, stood at the edge of the clearing. The leaves around it rustled like pages turning in an invisible book. The figure didn't move. But Mara knew what she had to do. She stood, gently brushing the folds of her soft robe, and stepped off the bench. Her feet made no sound on the moss. The golden petal lifted into the air and floated beside her, as if guiding her. As she moved toward the figure, the air grew warmer. Not hot, comforting. Like the quiet warmth of a blanket just out of the dryer. Or the gentle pressure of a mother's hand resting on your back while you sleep. When she reached the figure, it turned slowly. Two glowing eyes, not eyes exactly, but orbs of golden light, blinked up at her. It spoke, but not with lips. The voice came as wind between trees. I used to live here, I think. Before the garden floated. Before I forgot. Mara knelt before the figure. What did you forget, little one? The figure tilted its head. Everything, it said. Except that I'm looking for home. The golden petal pulsed brighter. Mara reached out slowly, not to touch, but to offer her hand. Then let's find it together, she whispered. The figure stepped forward. Its body shimmered, as if stitched together from mist and memory. As it took her hand, the garden responded, vines lifted, petals opened, a soft hum rose from the very roots of the floating forest. And then, all around them, hundreds of golden petals began to fall from the sky. Not fast, not loud, just gently, endlessly. Each one glowing like a memory returning home. The path ahead shimmered once again. And somewhere, Deep within the garden, the stars seemed to sigh with relief. The memory grove. The wind was quieter now. Dr. Mara Ellen walked slowly beside the small glowing figure, their steps soft and silent on the mossy floor of the cloud garden. Above them, giant leaves stretched out like the wings of sleeping birds, swaying gently with the breeze. The golden petal still floated near her shoulder, pulsing faintly with each breath she took, as if it could feel her heartbeat. Mara's fingers brushed gently over the edge of a tall fern that shimmered silver under the mist. As they passed, the leaves whispered in tones not quite language, just soft impressions. Emotions. Echoes. The childlike figure, its form woven from fog and golden light, paused. "This is where I lost it," it said softly. "Lost what?" Mara asked, kneeling beside it. The figure's eyes, those soft, glowing orbs, dimmed a little. "My name," it whispered. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The wind rustled through the trees like a forgotten lullaby. Overhead, clouds shifted in slow spirals, painting the sky in strokes of lavender and pearl. "This part of the garden," Mara murmured, turning her gaze ahead, "I don't remember dreaming it before." They had entered a new space, deeper than any she'd explored in her dream research. It was a grove, circular, surrounded by trees with bark that glowed faintly from within, like lanterns hidden beneath old skin. The trees curved inward, their branches meeting in a gentle, glowing canopy that let soft starlight filter through. And in the center of the grove stood a mirror. Not an ordinary mirror, but one made of liquid light, hovering just above the ground. Its surface rippled like a pond, even though there was no wind here. The child approached it. "When I looked into this," it said, "I stopped being someone. I started floating. I became just part of the garden." Mara watched closely. The mirror pulsed, responding to the figure's presence. Shapes flickered within it, clouds, forests, shadows of faces, soft laughter from memories too far away to hold. Mara stepped closer. "Would you like to try remembering?" she asked gently. The figure hesitated. "It might hurt." "Sometimes remembering does," Mara said, kneeling beside it again. "But forgetting forever hurts more." The golden petal drifted forward, slowly lowering itself into the surface of the mirror. As it touched, the entire grove sighed. The trees leaned inward. The mist thickened, and the air turned cooler, like a breath being held. The figure looked into the mirror. And in that still, glowing surface, the image of a child began to form, not made of mist, but skin and hair and eyes full of wonder. A real child, wearing a small backpack and holding a notebook filled with drawings of stars and trees. "That's me," the voice said in awe. "Do you know your name now?" Mara whispered. The child nodded slowly. "My name is Eli." And as the name was spoken, the mirror stilled. The trees glowed brighter. And the garden, in response, began to hum a gentle note, low and soothing, like the sound of a cello echoing through a dream. Eli turned toward Mara, his form now more solid, less shadow, more boy. "I don't know how I got lost," he said. "But I think I was dreaming too long. I forgot I was real." Mara reached out and took his hand. "You're not alone anymore." The mirror faded. And in its place, a new path opened, lined with soft lights that floated in the air like fireflies, flickering with every step they took. The garden was guiding them somewhere deeper still. Somewhere important. And above them, the stars began to shimmer in slow spirals, watching gently, like quiet guardians of this floating, sleeping world. The path of forgotten stars. The path ahead was soft, not made of stone or earth, but of something lighter, almost like memory. Each step Mara and Eli took sank slightly into the glowing surface, leaving behind faint impressions that slowly disappeared into shimmering dust. The lights that lined their way, like floating fireflies, whirled gently around them, sometimes rising into the air and tracing soft arcs above their heads before drifting back down. They didn't seem random. No, they moved with quiet intention, as if guiding them. Mara glanced down at Eli, whose hand was still resting in hers. He looked more real now, more awake somehow, but still glowing faintly at the edges. The golden petal, which had returned to float near Mara's shoulder, pulsed softly. "Where are we going?" Eli asked, not with fear, but with the calm curiosity of a child who trusted the mystery. "I don't know exactly," Mara replied truthfully. "But I think this path is showing us where you began, and maybe where you're meant to return." The garden around them had changed again. The trees were taller now, their trunks wrapped in spirals of faint blue vines that blinked softly like distant galaxies. Overhead, the sky had turned darker, indigo with brushstrokes of silver stars. The wind had become still, and the silence felt like a held breath. Then, in the distance, a soft sound began. Not music, not quite. More like a series of tones, gentle and spaced apart, like the ringing of distant crystal bells. Eli stopped. "That sound. I remember it." Mara turned to him. "What is it?" He looked up, eyes wide. "It's from the dream station." Mara blinked. "What's the dream station?" Eli tilted his head. "I used to visit it when I slept too deeply. That's where the scientists watch over all the dreams, where they keep the maps of the stars." Mara's breath caught. In all her years of studying dreams, of slipping through hypnagogic states and lucid loops, she had heard whispers of such a place. Some said it was just a myth, a shared invention of the unconscious. Others believed it truly existed in the deep layers of collective dreams, where souls wander when they've gone too far from waking. "Do you think it's real?" she asked. Eli nodded slowly. "It's real in here." He tapped his chest lightly. "It's real when you believe gently." The tones in the air grew louder, not harsh, but insistent, like a lullaby calling from very far away. The firefly lights swirled faster now, gathering ahead of them to form a gate, a circular ring of floating stars. Inside that ring shimmered a staircase made of glass and clouds. "The dream station is waiting," Eli said. Mara felt her heart slow. She should have been afraid. But there was no fear here, only a growing sense of stillness. Of something ancient, watching kindly. They stepped through the gate together. The staircase gave slightly under their feet, as if made of moonlight. It spiraled upward, yet it didn't feel like they were climbing. Instead, the world around them unfolded like a dream turning a new page, higher and softer, with stars dancing gently beside them. Halfway up, Mara looked out across the garden and saw its vastness. It stretched far beyond what she had imagined, miles of glowing trees, drifting fog, and light. Like a dream built for generations. She turned to Eli. "Do you think the dream station will help you remember the rest?" He nodded. "Yes. And maybe, it will help you too." "Me?" she asked softly. Eli gave her a sleepy smile. "You didn't come here just to find me. You came because something inside you needed to be found too." Mara held his gaze. The thought rang true, like a distant chime. She didn't know what part of herself was missing. But now, she would find out. Above them, the staircase opened into a quiet station of stars, drifting in velvet darkness. And as they stepped into its center, a voice, not loud, but clear, echoed around them. "Welcome, dreamer. You've arrived. The dream station." The room they entered didn't look like any lab Mara had seen before. There were no metal walls, no humming computers, no white coats or fluorescent lights. Instead, the dream station felt like a sanctuary stitched together from memory and starlight. It stretched out endlessly, like a great observatory made of clouds and curved mirrors. Soft constellations floated lazily across the domed ceiling, and quiet fountains of mist whispered in the corners. It smelled of lavender and old paper, like a library that had been dreaming for centuries. Floating books drifted by with no hands to turn them. Great panels of glowing glass gently hovered in the air, displaying strange maps, of dreams, of skies that no longer existed, of places that only ever lived inside imagination. Eli's steps slowed as he looked around. His face lit with familiarity. "I remember this place," he whispered. "This is where they watched me sleep." Mara placed a hand on his shoulder. "Who are they?" Just then, a soft humming sound began, like the quiet song of a star warming in the distance. From the far end of the chamber, 3 glowing figures approached. They weren't fully solid, but neither were they ghosts. Their forms shimmered like outlines drawn in moonlight, human-shaped, but fluid. Their robes floated behind them, weightless and woven with tiny galaxies. One of them spoke, its voice like wine through silk. "Welcome back, Eli. And welcome, Mara. You've come far." Mara opened her mouth to ask 100 questions, but somehow, they melted on her tongue. The quiet in this place didn't allow for panic or noise. It only allowed understanding. "You're the sleep scientists," she said finally. The figure bowed. "We are the caretakers of dreaming minds. Long ago, we were like you, wanderers of the in-between. But we stayed, to guide those who forget who they are when they drift too far from waking." Eli looked up at them. "Why did I forget?" The second figure stepped forward, kneeling gently before him. "Because sometimes, a dream is too heavy. Sometimes, a soul finds a place too soft and refuses to return." Mara's voice cracked. "You mean he didn't want to wake up?" The third figure spoke now, gentle, ancient. "No. Not exactly. But his purpose had not been finished in the waking world. So the dream held him, waiting, for someone who could lead him home." Eli turned to Mara. "That's you." She swallowed hard. "I didn't know." "You didn't need to know," the first figure said. "You only needed to care." A pause stretched between them. Somewhere, a distant chime rang again, this time lower, like the beginning of an answer. The second figure extended a hand and opened it. In its palm appeared a silver thread, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. "This is your tether," they said to Mara. "It connects your dreaming mind to your waking self. It's strong, but not unbreakable." Mara hesitated. "If I go back, will Eli come with me?" They nodded slowly. "If he chooses to." Eli stepped toward her. "I want to, but I'm afraid. What if I forget again?" "You won't," said Mara. "Because now I'll remember for both of us." The glowing scientists bowed. One of them whispered, "Then follow the thread." And suddenly, a path of starlight appeared beneath Mara's feet, woven like a soft bridge across the night. Mara took Eli's hand again. It felt warmer now, more real. They began to walk. And above them, the dream station slowly dimmed its lights, like a parent closing the door behind a child who had finally fallen asleep. The memory grove. The path of starlight beneath Mara and Eli's feet shimmered softly as they walked, like dew-kissed silk stretched across the sky. The silence wasn't empty, it was full of the kind of quiet that listens, deep, kind, and full of presence. As they walked farther into the dream, the air changed again. Gone was the soft, humming mist of the dream station. Now, a warm, golden glow filtered through the air, like sunlight caught in honey. The starlit bridge led them into a vast grove, an ancient forest that floated in midair, its roots dangling through clouds, its leaves glowing faintly as if lit from within. "Where are we now?" Mara whispered. Eli looked around, his eyes wide with something like recognition and something like awe. "This is the memory grove." All around them, the trees held memories, soft and flickering, like lanterns trapped inside leaves. Some leaves glowed with laughter. Others with sadness. Some shimmered with moments of discovery, first steps, first love, first failure, first wonder. One tree, thick and old, had a hollow in its center. Inside it, Mara saw something strange, a younger version of herself, curled up and reading under a blanket, a flashlight in hand, eyes wide with curiosity. She reached out. The image pulsed gently, warmly, not a memory to relive, but one to be reminded of. This place, Mara breathed, it's not just Eli's dream. It's mine too. Eli nodded. This is where dreaming minds connect. Where memories gather to rest when the waking world forgets them. As they walked deeper, they passed a tree covered in silver feathers. Its branches whispered like quiet birdsong. Another tree had crystal droplets hanging like fruit, each one echoing a soft word from someone Mara had once loved. In the heart of the grove stood a mirror tree, its bark reflective, its roots curled around a pool of still water. The reflection inside wasn't of the sky or stars, but of choices not taken. Paths they might have walked. Dreams they once abandoned. People they almost became. Mara saw herself in 100 versions, scientist, poet, traveler, mother, stranger. She felt tears prick her eyes. It's beautiful, and a little sad. That's how most truths are, Eli said gently. They sat by the pool in silence for a while. The stillness soothed their bones, like music made of breath. Then, Eli turned toward her. Mara. I don't think I came here on accident. I think I was meant to get lost. She looked at him. Why? So you could come find me. The golden leaves rustled softly above them, as if in agreement. And just then, a faint breeze stirred the grove, carrying with it a smell of something new, not memory, but possibility. Mara stood. Come on. There's more dream ahead. They walked once more, hand in hand, through the forest of forgotten moments, leaving behind their pasts, walking towards something uncertain, but full of wonder. And above them, the trees whispered their stories into the sky. The whispering winds. The memory grove faded behind them, its golden leaves still flickering with emotion as Mara and Eli stepped onto a new path, a narrow, airy bridge woven from threads of moonlight and mist. It swayed with their steps, but never wavered, as if it knew exactly where they needed to go. The wind had changed. No longer still, it danced gently around them, not cold or sharp, but soft, curious. It didn't howl or rush. It whispered. Not in words, not quite. But in feelings. In tugging thoughts. In emotions long buried. As they walked, Mara felt the wind brush her cheek like a mother's hand, familiar and kind. She closed her eyes and, for a moment, felt like a child again, safe, protected, endlessly small under a vast sky. What is this place? She murmured. Eli's voice was low. The dream winds. They carry what we don't say aloud. Fears we bury. Wishes we deny. All of it floats here, waiting. All around them, the wind shaped itself into fragments of dreams, hollow outlines of memories drifting past like smoke. A girl chasing butterflies. A boy standing at the edge of a boat. A teacher writing on a chalkboard with tears in her eyes. A scientist, falling asleep at her desk, alone but not lonely. Mara paused. That's me, she said softly, watching the dream shadow of herself slumped over her old lab bench, surrounded by notebooks and glowing instruments. Eli glanced at her. You gave everything to your work. I loved it, she said. Still do. The wind fluttered around her shoulders, not in judgment, but in understanding. They continued walking, and the wind thickened, becoming a tunnel of motion, a slow cyclone of stories. Soft voices called out. Not to scare, not to pull them away, but to remind them. Every choice they'd made had left echoes in the wind. I hear my father, Eli said suddenly. I never got to say goodbye. Mara reached for his hand. Then say it now. The wind listens. He closed his eyes. Goodbye, Dad. I miss you. I hope you'd be proud of me. The wind pulsed, as if in reply. A warm current swept around them, carrying Eli's words somewhere deep into the clouds. They walked in silence again for a while, until a faint shape appeared on the horizon, a spire, dark and tall, reaching up through the sky like a question. There, Mara said. Do you see it? Eli nodded. That's where the wind is taking us. And though neither of them knew what it was or what they would find there, the whispering wind seemed to say, You're almost ready. The dream was changing. Not ending. Just becoming something more. And somewhere, far beneath the clouds, the real world turned quietly onward, unaware that two dreamers were walking its skies, uncovering truths only the night could offer. The Tower of Echoes. The spire rose taller with every step Mara and Eli took. It looked like it had grown straight out of the clouds, spun from storm threads and silver. The wind quieted now, as if holding its breath. When they reached its base, the tower shimmered, not with light, but with sound. Mara stepped closer, placing her hand on the cool surface. A whisper tickled her ear. Don't give up. You're closer than you think. She turned to Eli. Did you hear that? He nodded. The tower stores every voice ever lost to sleep. Echoes of things people wish they'd said. Words left behind in the folds of dreams. The doorway opened without a sound. Inside, the walls were translucent and curved inward like a seashell. As they ascended the spiral stairs, soft murmurs surrounded them, not scary or loud, but gentle, persistent. They came from every direction, layered over one another like forgotten lullabies. Some voices were laughing. Some were crying. And some were just waiting. Halfway up, they came to a small room where the air felt warmer. Floating in the center was a globe of light, pulsing slowly. What is it? Mara whispered. Eli's voice was calm. This is where your echo lives. My echo? He nodded. The words you've never spoken. Feelings you never gave voice to. Doubts you buried. Hopes you barely dared to name. Mara reached out, and the light swirled open into a scene from long ago. A younger Mara sat in her childhood bedroom, staring out the window at the stars. Her journal was open on her lap, but the pages were blank. She was whispering, I want to understand the universe. I want to know why we dream. Why we forget. And why some people feel like they've lived more in their sleep than when they're awake. Older Mara swallowed a lump in her throat. I never told anyone that, she said. But you still became the person who chased those questions, Eli said gently. The globe dimmed, as if it had heard what it needed. And somewhere, deep in the tower, a chime rang, soft and low, like a bell being rung underwater. A door appeared at the top of the spiral. This one was different, made not of stone or mist, but of wood. Real, tangible, warm. There was a brass handle in the shape of a crescent moon. Mara turned it slowly, and the door opened into a sky lit with twilight colors, lavender, soft coral, and deep sapphire. Beyond the door was a bridge made of starlight threads. Eli looked at her. This is the threshold. Once we cross it, we may not come back the same. Mara smiled gently. Then let's not be afraid of who we'll become. Together, they stepped onto the bridge. And behind them, the Tower of Echoes sang softly, as if whispering goodbye to the voices they had finally heard. The river that remembers. The bridge behind them slowly dissolved into mist as Mara and Eli stepped forward. Before them stretched a wide, glimmering river, not made of water, but of light and memory. It shimmered in delicate ripples, casting reflections that didn't match the sky above. On one side, they could see a forest frozen in dawnlight. On the other, a field where stars bloomed like flowers. And in the center, flowing between all things, was the river that remembers. Eli kneeled at the river's edge and cupped his hands. The liquid light danced through his fingers like threads of silk. This river, he explained softly, holds all the dreams people forget when they wake up. Every idea that vanished with the morning light. Every feeling left behind on the pillow. Mara stepped forward. So the river is made of lost dreams? Yes, he said. And it remembers everything. She stared into the glowing current, her reflection flickering and shifting, changing into versions of herself she hardly recognized. In one moment, she was a child again, chasing fireflies in her backyard. In another, she was older, standing in a lab full of blinking lights, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. Do you want to see your forgotten dreams? Eli asked gently. Mara hesitated. Then nodded. The river responded immediately. From its glowing surface rose a silken orb of light, no larger than a pearl. It hovered before Mara, then slowly bloomed open like a flower. Inside was a scene, a moment she hadn't remembered in years. She was sitting in her old university library, late at night, head resting on a stack of books. Outside, snow drifted past the window. She had fallen asleep while reading about the hippocampus, dreaming about a map, one that could guide her through the landscape of the human mind. The dream had felt so real, but when she awoke, the details had vanished. Now, here it was, perfectly preserved in the river's memory. I thought. I lost this, she whispered. Eli smiled. You only misplaced it. Dreams are never really gone. They wait. Around them, more orbs began to rise, each one pulsing softly, filled with forgotten songs, drawings left unfinished, stories whispered once and never again. Mara turned to Eli. Can I take one with me? He nodded. But only one. You must choose carefully. She looked back at the orb of her map, the one from the snowy library. This one, she said. It led me here, once. Maybe it can lead me further still. As she reached out, the orb merged with her hand, and a faint golden mark bloomed on her palm, a spiral, glowing faintly. The wind shifted. The river calmed. And from the far bank, a shape began to rise, tall and translucent, made of stars and shadows. It was the guardian of time, a being who watched over the flow of memory. Its voice, when it spoke, was like the turning of pages. You carry a piece of your forgotten self. Use it wisely. Beyond this river lies the threshold of becoming. Many turn back here. Few move forward. Mara looked at Eli. He nodded, his expression calm and steady. I'm ready, she said. The guardian stepped aside, revealing a staircase made of clouds, rising into the night sky. With the memory of a dream reborn in her palm, Mara began to climb. The threshold of becoming. The staircase made of clouds was soft beneath Mara's feet, yet held her weight as if it knew her purpose. Each step carried her higher into a sky that shimmered with hues of twilight, not quite night, not yet dawn. Eli followed quietly behind her, the mist curling around his coat like silk threads seeking warmth. Neither of them spoke. This part of the journey demanded stillness. As they climbed, the world below, the river that remembers, the tower of echoes, the floating forests, faded into soft blur. Up here, the air was different. Thinner, but filled with something else, a presence. At last, they reached the top. It wasn't a summit but a threshold, a floating platform of translucent stone, suspended in endless sky. Above them, the stars moved slowly in spiraling patterns, as though they too were dreaming. In the center of the platform stood a single archway, carved from smooth crystal. Beyond it, nothing but silence. No landscape. No sound. No wind. Only a vast space of glowing silver mist. Eli stepped beside her. This is the threshold of becoming, he said softly. Every soul that travels through the cloud garden must pass through here. What happens in there? Mara asked, her voice barely a whisper. No one knows. It's different for everyone, he replied. The threshold shows you what you are, what you've forgotten, and what you could become. Mara's fingers brushed the spiral mark on her palm, the dream she had reclaimed from the river. It pulsed gently, as if sensing her hesitation. With a deep breath, she stepped through the crystal archway. The world went still. There was no floor, no sky, no boundary. Just a soft, luminous fog that wrapped around her gently, like the arms of a memory. And then, a heartbeat. Hers. Echoing in the silence. Then another. And another. A rhythm of something waking. In the mist, shapes began to form. She saw her childhood bedroom, small and cluttered, filled with star maps and notebooks. She saw herself, young and full of questions, watching the stars through a plastic telescope taped together with hope. She saw the moment she almost gave up, alone in her lab at midnight, papers crumpled in frustration, dreams unraveling. And she saw Eli. Sitting beside her on a bench in the rain, telling her stories about floating gardens and rivers of light. Had that been real? Or just a dream she'd once let go? The mist shifted again. Now, she stood before three versions of herself. One wore a crown of clouds, her eyes filled with wonder. Another wore a coat of feathers, wild and free, unburdened by logic. The third stood silent, wearing Mara's own face, calm, older, with stars in her eyes. Who do you want to become? They asked in one voice. Mara didn't know how to answer. She looked down at her hand. The spiral glowed brighter, warmer. And she realized, she didn't have to choose just one. She was already all of them, curious, brave, dreaming. I want to become whole, she said. The mist stirred. The threshold accepted. A wind blew gently through the silence, carrying her back. When she opened her eyes, she stood once more on the platform. Eli was there, watching. You've passed, he said. I saw everything, Mara whispered. Eli smiled. Then you're ready. He pointed behind her. The crystal archway had changed, it now opened into a golden path, winding through stars and floating islands of light. What lies ahead? She asked. The heart of the garden, he said. And together, they stepped forward, toward a dream that waited to be remembered. The heart of the garden. The golden path shimmered beneath Mara's feet like a ribbon of light. Weaving gently through an endless sky painted in soft hues of dawn and dusk, colors that didn't exist in the waking world. Eli walked quietly beside her. Neither of them needed words anymore. Around them, floating islands began to emerge from the mist, each one holding a fragment of something familiar, a childhood home built into a tree, a staircase made of books, a lantern glowing in an impossible hue. These were dreams, Mara realized, not just hers, but perhaps the dreams of every traveler who had ever walked this path. Finally, the path opened into a clearing. At its center stood a great tree, not growing from soil, but suspended in the air, its roots reaching down like long strands of golden thread. Its leaves shimmered with starlight, each one pulsing softly with its own glow. The tree didn't just live, it remembered. This is the heart of the garden, Eli said, his voice reverent. Every dream that ever passed through here left a memory in its leaves. Mara stepped closer, entranced. The tree seemed to hum, not with sound, but with presence, as though it was aware of her, gently welcoming her. She reached out and touched the bark. A ripple passed through her chest, warmth, sorrow, joy. Visions swirled behind her eyes, a child dancing in the rain, a woman standing on the edge of discovery, a scientist watching the stars and daring to ask questions no one else had considered. This is me, she whispered. And not just you, Eli said. The garden shows all who walk it what they've forgotten. what they're becoming. Mara turned slowly. Why was I brought here? She asked. Eli didn't answer immediately. He walked to the base of the floating tree and knelt, placing his hand on one of the glowing roots. The tree responded, a low, gentle pulse like a heartbeat. Then he looked up at her. Because you're ready to plant something of your own. He reached into his coat and brought out a small seed, swirling with mist and starlight. He placed it gently in her palm. This is your dream seed, he said. Born from the questions you've asked, the doubts you've faced, and the courage it took to walk this far. What you do with it will shape not just this place, but your world. Mara stared at the seed. It was warm and pulsing, alive. I don't know where to plant it, she said quietly. Close your eyes, Eli said. The garden knows. She closed her eyes. In the darkness behind her lids, she saw it, a small floating island, quiet and still, waiting for her. When she opened her eyes again, the path had shifted, and the garden seemed to lean forward, guiding her. Eli placed a hand on her shoulder. This part, you walk alone. Mara nodded. She held the dream seed close to her chest and stepped onto the new path, toward the island that had called her. The floating forest whispered softly around her. The wind carried the scent of dreams. And the garden, ancient and alive, watched gently, knowing that something new was about to begin. Planting the dream seed. The mist curled gently around Mara as she stepped onto the small floating island that had called to her. Unlike the others, this one was still, quiet, and untouched. There were no glowing roots, no flickering leaves, only soft moss beneath her feet and the gentle hush of cloud winds drifting past. It felt patient. As though it had been waiting for her all along. In her hand, the dream seed pulsed with warmth, its glow subtle, like a heartbeat in her palm. She knelt and brushed aside a patch of moss, revealing rich, velvety earth beneath. It was strange to see soil in the sky, but this place no longer obeyed the usual rules of the waking world. Mara took a breath. Then another. She placed the seed gently into the earth. The moment her fingers released it, the ground glowed faintly around the spot where it rested. A soft hum rose, like the garden was exhaling in response. She sat back, watching, unsure of what to expect. For a while, nothing happened. Just the wind, the mist, and her own quiet breathing. But then, like the slow lifting of a veil, something began to stir. Tiny shoots of light emerged from the soil. Not green, but silver blue, with edges that shimmered like moonlight on water. They grew slowly, gracefully, curling into the air with a dancer's poise. The plant had no leaves at first, just luminous threads that reached outward, sensing the space around them. Mara leaned in closer. As the threads unfurled, they began to form patterns, shapes that felt strangely familiar. A spiral like the one on her childhood notebook. The outline of a telescope lens. A constellation she once stared at for hours as a girl. The plant was weaving memories into itself. "What is this?" she whispered. And just then, the island responded. A soft voice, not spoken aloud, but inside her, gentle as sleep and clear as starlight. "It is you." The realization hit her like a tide. This wasn't just a plant, it was a mirror. A reflection of her curiosity, her wonder, her longing to understand the universe. Her dream seed was growing into something entirely unique, a living memory, rooted in the sky. Suddenly, a soft crunch of steps behind her. Mara turned. Eli had returned, though he kept his distance, standing at the edge of the island. He smiled, a quiet pride in his eyes. "Most people think dreams fade," he said. "But here, they take root." She looked back at her growing tree. Its branches had begun to form, delicate and crystalline, reaching not just upward, but outward, touching the air like fingers seeking connection. "It's beautiful," she breathed. It's only the beginning, Eli said. It will keep growing as long as you keep dreaming. Mara sat in silence, watching her dream bloom. The world around her felt soft and slow, as though time had folded itself into a blanket of mist and memory. No urgency. No noise. Just the gentle unfolding of something true. And in that moment, with the wind brushing her face and the starlit tree whispering its first leaves into the sky, Mara knew. This wasn't just a story about clouds, or gardens, or even dreams. It was about becoming. The ripples begin. The hours passed softly. Above, the sky had darkened into hues of deep lavender and indigo. Stars blinked slowly into view, like distant fireflies finding their place. Mara sat by the dream tree, now twice as tall as she was, its crystal-like leaves shimmering in a quiet rhythm that matched her breath. But something was changing. She could feel it first in the air, a hum, almost too subtle to hear, but strong enough to feel. It was like a current moving through the clouds, not wind, exactly, but something more emotional. Like a ripple of thought. Mara stood and looked out across the cloud sea. At first, everything looked still. And then, on the nearest floating island, she saw a light. A flicker. Then another. Tiny sparkles began to appear on other islands, scattered like candle flames across the mist. Each one glowing faintly, like a heartbeat awakened. She turned to Eli, who had been standing quietly behind her once again, his face calm but knowing. Are those? He nodded. Others have started dreaming. Her heart beat faster. Because of the tree? He smiled gently. Because of you. You planted something that speaks to more than just you. When a dream is rooted with intention, it resonates. It calls to others, not in words, but in memory. Mara's gaze drifted from the lights to the sky above. The constellations shimmered a little brighter now, like they, too, were part of this silent awakening. The air had changed. It was softer, deeper, and filled with a strange, collective stillness, as if the sky itself were listening. And then she felt it. Not just around her, but within her. A thought, no, a presence, that wasn't her own. It drifted across her mind gently, like a leaf landing on water. A memory, blurry at first, a boy on a swing, laughing in the rain. It wasn't hers. But somehow, she could feel its warmth, its weight, its realness. It had come from one of the other dreamers. I'm feeling someone else's memory, she whispered. They're sharing it, Eli said. Without meaning to. Without even knowing how. That's what dream roots do. They don't just grow trees. They grow connection. The idea was both wondrous and humbling. All across this floating forest, people were beginning to dream, and without speaking a word, they were sharing pieces of themselves. It was as if the sky had become a quilt of soft stories, sewn together in silence and mist. Mara closed her eyes. And more memories flowed to her like music. A grandmother's humming in a candlelit kitchen. A mountain top, where someone had stood with arms wide to the wind. A whispered bedtime story, told in a language she didn't understand but somehow still felt. Tears touched her eyes. Not from sadness. But from the quiet power of it all. This was not a garden of plants. It was a garden of people. Of hearts and hopes. Of moments and meanings. And Mara realized then that she was no longer just a visitor to the cloud garden. She had become part of its story. A shadow in the dream. The air had grown cooler now, the kind of stillness that often comes before a soft rain or a long sigh. Mara stood near the dream tree, hands gently resting against its smooth trunk. The bark pulsed faintly beneath her fingers, as if the tree itself were alive, not with sap, but with memory. She had spent the last few hours quietly absorbing the shared thoughts drifting in from dreamers across the floating garden. Some were warm and golden, childhood laughter, sunlight on skin, the scent of bread baking. But then came something different. It began slowly, like a chill in the wind. Mara felt her breath hitch as a new memory slipped through the mist and into her mind. Dark water. A hallway. A door that wouldn't open. She wasn't sure if it was fear she felt, or simply sorrow. The feeling was murky, like trying to cry. Underwater. Eli appeared beside her silently, as he always did when something shifted. He placed one hand lightly on the tree, just above hers. You felt it too, Mara whispered. He nodded slowly. Not every dream is soft. Not every memory is safe. Mara didn't pull her hand away. Why would someone send that into the garden? They didn't send it, Eli said. It simply came. Sometimes, when the heart opens, it doesn't choose only the bright parts. It lets the shadow slip through too. Mara stared at the tree. The trunk was still glowing softly, but now she noticed tiny lines of deeper color, dark silver veins running like roots just beneath the surface. They hadn't been there before. Or maybe, she hadn't seen them until now. Will it hurt the tree? She asked. No, he replied. The tree is made to hold both joy and sorrow. That's what makes it real. That's what makes it grow. Mara took a slow breath. She had come to the cloud garden expecting peace, beauty, and escape from the noise of the waking world. But now, she was realizing that true peace wasn't the absence of pain, it was the gentle space that allowed everything to breathe, even the difficult memories. She sat down beneath the tree, wrapping her arms around her knees. The mist curled around her like a blanket. More thoughts began to drift in, not as clear pictures, but feelings. Heavy ones. A quiet apology. A forgotten goodbye. A long-held ache. They weren't hers. And yet, she held them gently in her mind, like fragile stones. Eli sat beside her. They didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he said, you know, every memory here changes the garden. But the way you choose to receive it, that's what shapes the garden's heart. Mara let his words settle like dew on her skin. The floating forests above twinkled faintly with shared light. And now, she noticed, some of the islands that had once been dim were beginning to glow too. As if the darkness had softened, not disappeared, but transformed. Maybe that was the point. Not to erase pain. But to offer it a place to land, gently, without judgment. To let it float among the stars until it no longer weighed the dreamer down. Mara closed her eyes. And whispered, to no one and everyone. I see you. Even the part of you that hurts. And you are still welcome here. The memory beneath the mist. The dream tree stood still in the cool, quiet air, its luminous leaves rustling like whispers. Mara remained seated beneath it, eyes closed, her breath rising and falling in a slow rhythm that matched the pulse of the tree itself. But somewhere in the distance, a little deeper in the mist, something was calling. It wasn't loud. In fact, it was barely there at all. Just a feeling. A faint tug, like a forgotten thought brushing the edge of awareness. She opened her eyes. The garden, as always, stretched endlessly around her, its floating islands lit by starlight and drifting lanterns of memory. Yet now, something had changed. Off to the right, a bridge she hadn't seen before extended across a chasm of soft, swirling fog. It looked old. Fragile. As though it had not been crossed in a very long time. Mara rose to her feet. Eli, who had been silent beside her, spoke quietly. That bridge leads inward. Inward, she echoed. Not into someone else's dream, he said. Into yours. Mara hesitated. But I didn't bring any memories here. You didn't need to, Eli replied. You are here. And every part of you travels with you, even the pieces you've forgotten, or buried. She looked at the bridge again. The mist around it shimmered slightly, as if it were holding its breath. Something told her this path wasn't dangerous, but it would not be easy either. Still, she stepped forward. Each footstep across the bridge was silent. The mist grew thicker with every step, swirling gently at her ankles, then her knees. And yet the further she went, the warmer the air became, like an unseen fire flickering somewhere ahead. Then, without warning, the mist parted. And she saw it. A room. Simple, quiet, lit by a single hanging lamp. A desk covered in paper. A mug of cold tea. A cracked window letting in the faintest breeze. It was her childhood bedroom. She stood frozen. No one was there, but the air was thick with feeling. Familiar. Heavy. On the desk was a notebook. She stepped closer, hands trembling, and opened it. The pages were filled with writing. Her writing. Scribbled observations about insects, drawings of stars, questions she had asked as a girl that no one ever answered. And at the very back. A letter. Folded. Yellowed with time. Her name was written on the front in her own small, clumsy handwriting. To me, it said. Mara sat slowly at the desk and unfolded it. The words were simple. Honest. A child's attempt to comfort herself. If you are reading this, it means you're older now. Maybe even a real scientist. I hope you didn't forget how much you love the sky. I hope you still believe in the things we used to imagine. And I hope the lonely feeling goes away someday. Even if it doesn't, it's okay. We'll figure it out. Her hands trembled. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, exactly, but from the aching tenderness of remembering who she used to be, and how much that small, dreaming girl had carried. The cloud garden hadn't just brought her into the dreams of others. It had brought her back to herself. To the part of her that had once believed magic lived in moonlight, and that one day, she'd find a place where she truly belonged. She folded the letter and placed it close to her heart. As she stood and turned, the room faded gently into mist again, dissolving like a memory that had finally been seen. The bridge waited behind her, silent and sure. And across it, on the other side, the tree glowed brighter than it ever had before. The garden stirs. Mara stepped lightly back onto the bridge, her footsteps soft against the wooden slats. The mist behind her, where her childhood room had appeared, now shimmered like a memory tucked safely away in her heart. With each breath, she felt lighter. Not because the sadness had vanished, but because she had finally acknowledged it. As she crossed, something shifted. The cloud garden, silent and dreamlike for so long, began to stir. Leaves rustled without wind. Floating islands slowly shifted positions in the sky. The shimmering thread lanterns that drifted through the air glowed brighter, their movements more deliberate. It was as if the entire dream had taken a breath with her. Eli stood beneath the dream tree, watching her with eyes that sparkled faintly, as if catching light from deep within. You remembered, he said simply. I didn't mean to forget, she whispered. No one ever does, he replied. Mara turned slowly, looking around. It's different now. It will keep changing, he said. Because you're changing. And indeed, the floating garden was no longer still. Some islands now spun gently, like petals on the surface of a pond. Others drifted nearer to her. One carried a tall mirror, though instead of a reflection, it showed a memory of Mara's first experiment as a student. Another held a wooden bench beneath a weeping willow that she had sketched in a notebook years ago but never visited in waking life. The garden was becoming her. A reflection not only of the people she had helped or dreams she had entered, but of her own essence, her own longing, her own quiet strength. She took a slow walk through one of the drifting paths. Beneath her feet, small soft lanterns lit with each step. They pulsed softly in time with her heartbeat. Birds, not quite real, not quite imagined, sang gently from the air, their feathers woven from dreams. One of them swooped low, brushing against her shoulder like a blessing. It carried a folded leaf in its beak, and when it dropped it into her hand, she saw it wasn't just a leaf, it was a page from a dream journal she hadn't written yet. It read, "When you begin to remember yourself, the dream world begins to remember you, too." She looked up. There, in the sky above, the stars had shifted position. Slowly, subtly. They formed a new constellation, one shaped like a curled sleeping fox, tail wrapped around its body. She had drawn that shape in a childhood sketchbook once, calling it, the Guardian of Quiet. How was it possible that the stars themselves remembered? Unless this wasn't just the dream of a scientist wandering the sleep-laced edges of the human mind. This was the dream of the sleep scientist, the one who listens, who heals, who remembers when others forget. The one who gathers the lost pieces of dreams and gently brings them home. Suddenly, she understood why the garden had chosen her. Not because she was the most brilliant. Not because she was the most adventurous. But because she was willing to sit still. To listen. To feel deeply. And to believe, quietly, stubbornly, that healing could come through remembering. From a distance, the dream tree's bark shimmered with gold threads now. Its roots pulsed like the heart of the garden itself. And just below its glowing canopy, a new door had appeared. Mara turned to Eli. He gave a small nod. "It's time for you to see what lies beneath." The door beneath the tree. The new door beneath the dream tree shimmered like moonlight on deep water. It wasn't made of wood or stone, but something softer, something ancient, like woven memory. Threads of silver and quiet starlight curled around its edges, pulsing gently as if it breathed. Mara stood before it. The garden behind her was still whispering, soft winds stirring petals in the sky, lantern birds tracing slow spirals above her head, but this door was silent. It didn't beckon. It simply waited. Eli came to stand beside her. "This door," he said quietly, "isn't just an entrance. It's a return." "A return to where?" He looked at her. "To the first dream. The one that started it all." Mara felt the words like a tremor beneath her ribs. She had dreamed 1,000 dreams. She had studied the patterns of thought and sleep for years. She had even wandered through other people's minds, tending their sorrows like delicate gardens. But her first dream, the one that brought her to the edge of this mysterious cloud garden, she had forgotten. Until now. She reached forward, her fingers brushing the fabric of the door. It didn't open with a sound or motion. It folded. Like a curtain of mist falling away. And what lay beyond was not what she expected. Not roots or stone. Not tunnels or chambers. But sky. A wide, starlit sky with no bottom and no top. Just light, and softness, and infinite stillness. Floating within it was a cradle. Delicate. Pale. Carved from clouds and vines. And inside the cradle, curled like a sleeping thought, was a version of Mara. A child. Maybe 3 or 4 years old. Fast asleep. Her breathing matched the rhythm of the dream tree's golden roots. Mara stepped forward, not on ground but on beams of dreamlight, gently carrying her toward the cradle. "Is this, me?" she whispered. Eli stayed behind the threshold. "This is the part of you that never stopped dreaming. Even when the world asked you to wake up." The child's hair curled gently around her brow. Her fingers were closed around a small object, a tiny glass orb, glowing faintly. Mara leaned closer. Inside the orb was a garden. A floating one. The very one she now stood in. Her breath caught. "I dreamed this, before I ever understood what dreams were." "Yes," Eli said. "And it waited. Because some dreams are too important to vanish. They become places. Sanctuaries. They wait until we're ready." Mara looked down at the child version of herself. She reached out, and touched the orb. The moment her fingers brushed the glass, the entire cloud garden pulsed. Not in fear. Not in warning. But in awakening. The lanterns brightened. The stars realigned. The bridges whispered across the sky like river ribbons. And far, far away, the echo of a voice stirred. Not Eli's. Not her own. Something older. Something that had watched quietly for a very long time. Mara stood still, holding the orb in both hands now. The sleeping child slowly faded from the cradle, becoming light, becoming warmth, and then gently merged with her. Not lost. Not gone. Returned. Eli stepped forward again. The garden will change now. It's no longer only a memory. Mara nodded slowly, her eyes wide. It's alive. It always was, he said. But now, you are too. The voice in the light. The garden no longer shimmered quietly. It glowed. The lantern birds now sang in harmonic hums, low, gentle pulses that echoed not just through the air, but through Mara's body. She felt it in her chest, her hands, her memory. And far above, in the clouds overhead, the sky had split, not in violence, but in revelation. A beam of silvery light cascaded down in a perfect column, touching the garden center. And from within it, a voice spoke. Not aloud. Not in language. But in feeling. A voice as old as sleep itself. You've come far, dream keeper. Mara stood in the garden center, the orb still cupped in her palms. She couldn't see where the voice came from. There was no face. No figure. Just a knowing. Long ago, when your kind first dreamed beneath the stars, this place was born, the voice continued. Not by hands, but by longing. By wonder. By the quiet question every soul asks before it sleeps, what more is there? Eli stepped beside her once again, though now he felt smaller, quieter, almost like a dream of himself. Mara realized, he was a guide. A companion shaped by her own subconscious, like the floating bridges or skyplants. Who are you? Mara asked gently. I am the first sleep, said the voice. The stillness that was here before minds knew time. The keeper of the dream seed. I was planted when the first creature looked at the stars and closed its eyes, not from fear, but from curiosity. Mara's breath caught. You are the first to return to the center, the voice continued. Many visit dreams. Few remember. Fewer still listen. But you carried the garden inside you. You gave it breath. Eli turned to her. This garden never existed outside of you, Mara. But it also belongs to everyone. Every dreamer who ever wondered about the clouds, the stars, the meaning of silence. The light around the orb pulsed. It was beginning to soften, to release something. The orb you carry holds the memory of the first dream, said the voice. You may keep it, or plant it. Plant it? Mara whispered. A new garden. A real one. In your waking world. One that grows not from soil, but from stories, from rest, from care. The idea sank into her heart like a sunrise. She had come all this way thinking she was unraveling something within herself. But now she saw the truth. This journey had not been just about her healing. It had been about returning with the tools to heal others. Will I remember? She asked, tears softening her voice. If you choose to. But even if you forget, the seed will remember. A breeze moved through the garden, not from weather, but from the shifting of intention. The lantern birds gathered above her now, wings outstretched like petals. She knelt and placed the orb in a bed of glowing moss near the dream tree's roots. It pulsed once. Twice. And then, gently, cracked open. From within it, a single leaf unfurled. Not green, but made of light. And it sang. Not with sound, but with hope. When dreams take root. The light leaf shimmered softly in the moss, its glow pulsing like a sleeping heartbeat. Around it, the ground seemed to breathe, as if the garden itself was exhaling a long-held sigh of peace. Mara knelt by the planted orb, still watching the transformation unfold. The moment was silent, but not empty, it was rich with promise. As if something ancient had been waiting all this time, for her. Eli stood nearby, his gaze warm and steady. "This is what happens," he said, "when a dream is believed in enough to become real." All around them, the cloud garden began to shift. The floating bridges curved downward, gently anchoring themselves into patches of sky soil. The feather-leaved trees started to shimmer less like illusion and more like memory, real memory. The kind you don't just wake from, but carry with you. One of the lantern birds landed gently beside the new seedling. It tucked its head and let out a gentle trill, a lullaby for the growing dream. "You said I could take this back with me," Mara whispered. Eli nodded. "Not just as a thought. As a beginning. A seed of rest. Of wonder. Of care." She stood up slowly. The air felt different now, thicker, like it had weight. Like time was beginning to return. The dream was nearing its end, but it wasn't fading, it was settling. Above them, the sky stretched wider than ever, painted with soft streaks of silver and violet. And for the first time since Mara had arrived, she could see the horizon. Not just in the dream, but beyond it. A place waiting for her. A world that needed a cloud garden. "Mara," the soft voice of the light returned, "you are waking." Her heart fluttered, unsure if it was sorrow or joy. Maybe both. Eli offered her his hand. And together they walked back through the dream path, which was now dotted with blooming light flowers and floating notes of memory, tiny echoes of the journey they had made. As they passed the mirror lake, she caught her reflection again. But this time, it didn't look tired. It looked whole. Like someone who had listened to the silence and found herself in it. At the edge of the garden, where the dream began and the waking world waited, Eli paused. "We all return to the clouds eventually," he said. "But what matters is what we plant when we return to the earth." She nodded, holding that thought gently. And then, the world grew brighter. Not harsh. Not sudden. Just, morning. The morning after the garden. Mara opened her eyes to a soft gray light pouring gently through the glass roof of her tiny home. The mist still hung around the treetops outside, but it was the familiar kind now, the mist of morning, not of dreams. She blinked slowly, adjusting to the quiet hum of real life. The hum of her tea kettle warming on its timer. The slow tick of her wall clock. The subtle rustling of pages in a book she'd left open on her desk. And yet, something had changed. She lay still beneath her blanket, replaying the feeling of Eli's hand in hers. The glow of the planted dream seed. The lullaby of the lantern bird. Had it all been just a dream? Her fingers brushed over the notebook that had fallen open beside her during the night. To her surprise, a small, golden petal lay pressed between two pages. Faintly glowing. Her breath caught. It was real. Or, as real as any dream with meaning ever is. She rose slowly, like someone who had just stepped ashore after a long journey. Her body felt light, rested. Her mind, even lighter. She poured a cup of tea and stepped out onto her little porch. The forest outside was the same, but her eyes were different. She noticed the way the dew on the leaves shimmered, catching the first light like stars had decided to stay a little longer. She saw the birds moving through the branches not as background noise but as tiny messengers of life. The quiet was no longer empty. It was alive. Mara sat with her tea, notebook in hand, the glowing petal resting between her fingertips. She had always studied the science of sleep. The patterns, the chemistry, the stages of dreaming. But now, something deeper had taken root in her. She understood that sleep wasn't just a function of the body, it was a gift. A doorway. A quiet garden hidden inside every human being, waiting to be wandered, tended, and gently listened to. She turned to a fresh page in her notebook and began to write. The cloud garden isn't gone. It lives in the way we notice softness. In the way we breathe before speaking. In the dreams we believe in, even when we're awake. As the sun slowly rose over the misty trees, Mara smiled to herself. She had work to do. But now, it would be different. Not just studying sleep, but guiding others to the gardens within them. The letter that wasn't delivered. That morning, Mara's world had returned to its usual rhythm, the gentle kind, where tea steamed in a porcelain cup and notebooks were lined neatly in rows. But even the most ordinary days can hold quiet magic. She was tidying her desk when she noticed something strange. An envelope, pale blue and resting perfectly still, almost hidden beneath a stack of books. She didn't remember placing it there. It wasn't sealed. No stamp. No address. Just her name. Her hands paused. The air shifted ever so slightly, like someone was watching, not in fear, but in anticipation. She unfolded the letter carefully, and the handwriting inside was unfamiliar. It was written in dark violet ink, curling like vines. To the one who walked through the cloud garden. You do not yet know the reach of dreams. Every soul who sleeps carries a gate. Every heart that dares to listen carries a key. You have planted the seed, and it has taken root. Now others stir in their slumber, sensing a garden they've never seen, remembering a place they've never been. We felt the moment your lantern was lit. The dreamers are waking. Signed. The keeper of the quiet map. Mara read it twice. 3 times. Her pulse was steady, but her breath came with a chill. Who had written this? And how had it appeared on her desk? She turned the letter over. No return address. No clue. But just as she leaned closer, she saw something strange on the back of the envelope, a faint, shimmering map. No ink, just light. Barely visible unless tilted just right. A constellation pattern, and a trail. The trail ended not at her house, but just beyond the northern edge of the floating garden. In a place that wasn't supposed to exist. She looked out the glass wall of her study. Through the mist and beyond the spiraling vine bridge, a soft golden glimmer had begun to flicker at the horizon. A second garden? Or a visitor? She stood very still, the letter clutched to her chest. Dreams were spreading. And she wasn't the only one walking through them anymore. The hidden glade beneath the cloud veil. By now, Mara had learned something essential about the cloud garden. It only reveals what you're ready to see. And so, with the pale blue letter folded neatly into her coat pocket, she stepped softly beyond the spiraling vine bridge, into the part of the floating forest she had never dared to explore. The golden glimmer ahead was not a trick of light. It pulsed like a heartbeat, calm, steady, inviting. Mara passed trees that hummed softly as she walked by, their branches bowing slightly, as though acknowledging her presence. Mist parted for her path, not because she commanded it, but because she belonged now. The garden had accepted her. Or perhaps, it had always known she would come this far. As the path curved sharply, she saw it. A veil of mist as thick as cotton and nearly as luminous as moonlight hung in the air, rippling softly. She paused in front of it. Her fingers brushed the edge, and instead of moisture, she felt a warmth, like holding a page fresh from an old book, or pressing your palm to someone's sleeping chest. Without hesitation, she stepped through. And there it was. The hidden glade beneath the cloud veil. A quiet clearing unlike anything she'd seen in the floating world. At its center, a vast, ancient mirror pool stretched out like a sleeping lake. Trees leaned inward, their silvery leaves glowing faintly and whispering secrets to the water. Strange, floating orbs, like tiny stars, bobbed gently in the air, each one pulsing softly in rhythm. And just beyond the pool stood a door. A door with no walls. No building around it. Just standing, tall, carved of shimmering dark wood, adorned with glowing glyphs that shimmered when Mara looked directly at them. Above the door, a brass plaque read, "The Observatory of Forgotten Sleep." Mara's heart skipped. The name sent a strange, beautiful ache through her chest, like remembering something wonderful from a dream just before it fades. She stepped toward it, cautiously. As she moved, she noticed something else: footprints. Bare, small, delicate. Leading up to the pool's edge, and then vanishing. Someone else had been here. Or was still here. Mara knelt at the edge of the water and looked into it. She expected to see her own reflection, but what she saw instead made her breath catch. A child's face. Wide-eyed, drowsy. Familiar. Not because she knew the child, but because it looked like her. A younger version of herself, eyes full of wonder. Watching her from beneath the surface. And then, just for a moment, the child smiled, and reached upward, her fingers brushing against the mirrored surface. The ripples shimmered like galaxies, and the orbs above the pool sang a soft, ringing note, like wind chimes at twilight. Then, silence. Mara stood, heart pounding gently, not with fear, but with wonder. Whatever lay beyond that door, it was tied to her in ways she didn't yet understand. And tomorrow night, she would walk through it. The Observatory of Forgotten Sleep. Mara stood before the tall, freestanding door, its dark wood gleaming faintly under the soft light of the floating orbs. The air around her was thick with hush, as if even the leaves had paused their rustling to witness what she might choose next. She reached forward. The moment her hand touched the bronze handle, the glyphs on the wood glowed brighter, then dimmed, like a slow heartbeat settling into rest. The door opened without sound, not swinging outward or inward, but dissolving softly like mist caught in the morning sun. Beyond it lay a vast, circular room. But not a room in any ordinary sense. It had no roof, just the endless twilight sky of the floating forest above, its clouds drifting slowly past like thoughts in a dreaming mind. The floor beneath her feet was made of dark stone, etched with spiraling patterns and constellations she didn't recognize. And around the perimeter stood dozens of tall, strange instruments, part telescope, part music box, part sculpture, crafted from brass, glass, and moonstone. This was not a place built by hands. It felt grown. Evolved. Like it had waited for her. In the center of the observatory stood a large circular platform, slightly raised, with soft cushions and a reclining seat that looked carved from a single piece of glowing wood. Above it hovered a transparent dome, shaped like a dewdrop. It shimmered with floating particles, images, dreams, memories, whispers of stories not yet told. Mara stepped closer. A plaque beside the platform read, "Dreams drift, but are never lost. Here, they are remembered." She lay down gently on the cushion, the dome adjusting to her presence with a soft chime. Her breath slowed. Her thoughts softened. As she closed her eyes beneath the dome, a melody began to play, faint, distant, like it was echoing across time. Then the instruments surrounding the platform came to life. One by one, they began to capture her memories. Not just the memories she remembered, but the ones her heart had kept safe. The forgotten lullabies her mother used to hum. The warmth of her grandmother's hand when she was afraid. The sound of her own childhood laughter echoing in a field of fireflies. Above her, a dream unfolded. She was floating, not in the garden, but in a great cosmic sea. Stars drifted by like dandelion seeds. And from each star came a story, an echo of a dream someone once had. A dream of peace. A dream of flying. A dream of home. Mara reached out to touch one, and as she did, it unraveled into an entire world. A sleepy village under a violet moon. Cats that could talk, and trees that whispered bedtime stories. She felt weightless, safe, completely wrapped in a blanket of starlit calm. Then, a voice, not loud, but warm and kind, spoke beside her. You've remembered what most forget. That dreams are not just stories we tell ourselves at night. They are messages. Maps. Warnings. Wishes. And you, Mara. You're one of the keepers now. Mara didn't open her eyes. She smiled softly. For the first time in years, she felt like she had arrived exactly where she was meant to be. The observatory watched gently, holding her dreams like fragile, glowing seeds. And the floating forest exhaled a quiet breath of contentment. The memory architect. Mara drifted in a quiet sleep, wrapped in the observatory's cocoon of warmth and soft light. The starlit dream still lingered behind her eyelids, glowing fragments of the floating village, talking cats, and violet moons echoing in her heart. But slowly, as though the wind was changing, the dream began to shift. She opened her eyes, not with surprise, but with that calm acceptance only dreams allow. The sky above was now filled with soft-moving lights, like paper lanterns guided by unseen hands. And before her stood someone new. He looked familiar. But not from her past. He wore a robe woven from threads of silver mist and deep green moss. His eyes shimmered, not with age or youth, but with stories. Dozens, maybe hundreds. He held a staff made of twisted cloudwood, and from its tip dangled a small, glowing orb, flickering softly like a pulse. You're awake, he said with a smile that reached deep into her spirit. Not many reach the observatory on their first journey. Fewer still awaken here. Mara sat up gently. Who are you? I'm called the Memory Architect, he said. Though names change, and mine has been many things. My task, though, is always the same. I design the resting places for memories, yours, mine, and those long forgotten. He turned and gestured for her to follow. Come. There's something I want to show you. Together, they walked beyond the observatory's central dome, where a hidden path now revealed itself, a glowing bridge of translucent crystal arching over a silent pond filled with stars instead of water. Each step echoed like a soft bell. Long ago, he began, before the forest floated and before dreams turned to gardens, people used to bury their memories, deep in the earth or deep in themselves. Painful ones. Beautiful ones. They believed forgetting was healing. Mara listened closely, her breath matching the slow rhythm of their steps. But dreams, he said, do not forget. They wait. He pointed ahead to a giant wall, towering and curved, like the inside of a great shell. Across it, millions of tiny golden seeds were embedded. Some glowed brightly. Others pulsed faintly. Some barely flickered at all. These, he whispered, are unplanted dreams. Stories that were never told. Hope someone once had, but lost in the noise of waking life. Mara stepped closer. One of the golden seeds blinked as she neared, then flared slightly, recognizing her presence. She gasped. This one, it's mine. The architect nodded. You dreamt of flying once, he said gently. Not just in the air, but in freedom. You wanted to be unbound, unafraid, able to move through the world like light. But then, something made you fold that dream away. Tears welled in Mara's eyes, not of sadness, but of recognition. She reached toward the seed. With a soft sound like wind in a distant forest, it lifted from the wall, glowing brighter, and gently floated into her palm. It was warm, alive. Will it grow? She asked. The architect smiled. It already is. Every step you've taken here has watered it. She looked around, suddenly aware that the forest had grown quieter, not darker, but more reverent. As if the trees themselves were listening. The observatory, the instruments, the sky, all leaned in gently. "I'm scared," Mara whispered. "What if I forget again when I wake?" "You won't," said the architect, placing a hand over hers. "Because now, you know where your dreams live." He pointed toward the sky. "Not above. Not beyond. But within." A gentle wind blew, lifting her hair. The observatory's great dome shimmered once more, and the forest breathed. Again. "You're ready for the final part of your journey," he said. "But only when you choose." And with that, the memory architect slowly stepped back into the mist, fading like the last line of a lullaby. Mara looked down at the glowing seed in her hand. It pulsed, then softly opened, revealing not a flower, but a map. A map made of stars. The garden of falling skies. The seed in Mara's palm shimmered with a quiet breath of light, its star map unfolding like the delicate wings of a moth. The patterns it revealed were unlike any she had seen before, not constellations from the sky above, but from something deeper, a sky within. The soft voice of the observatory faded behind her as she followed the path drawn in glowing threads. Her steps were light, but her heart full and awake, like a lantern burning slowly in stillness. The map led her to a place the forest had long hidden, a gentle hill that arched into the clouds like the curve of a sleeping creature's back. Trees here were different, taller, yes, but more translucent, their branches like veins of glass, filled with slow-moving light. Above them, the sky rippled softly, as if remembering how to breathe. And then, it happened. A single star fell from the sky. Then another. And another. They did not crash or burn, they drifted down gently, like feathers in slow motion. Some landed on leaves. Others floated to the ground and dissolved like snowflakes. Each one left behind a soft chime in the air. Mara stood still, arms outstretched. A star brushed her sleeve and vanished, leaving warmth behind. She looked up, and realized what this place was. This wasn't the end of the garden. It was the place where skies came to rest. The fallen stars were not dead, only dreaming. The sky above was shedding not light, but memory. Celestial echoes from long ago, of voices, promises, and things forgotten. She sat down in the center of the garden, the star map still faintly glowing beside her. And slowly, she began to listen. Each fallen star told a story. One whispered of a girl who once dreamed of becoming an astronaut, but lost her way in noise and fear. Another sang the melody of a boy who painted stars on the ceiling of his childhood room, hoping to remember what hope felt like. The stars didn't cry. They didn't mourn. They simply remembered. Gently. Softly. Then a voice behind Mara stirred her from her stillness. "You've come far." She turned. It was the Cloud Keeper. He looked older now, or perhaps simply more true. His eyes held constellations she hadn't seen before. The fabric of his cloak shimmered with galaxies and rivers of light. "This is the last place," he said. "Where skies begin again." Mara blinked. "I don't understand." "You were never just wandering," he said, sitting beside her. "You were returning." He touched the seed map in her hand, and it dissolved into starlight. "Your dreams led you back here, to where they first fell." He gestured to the sky, now a soft canvas of dusk. "There was a time," he continued, "when people looked up and thought the sky was above them. But those who truly listened, the dreamers, the quiet ones, knew it was also inside." Mara nodded. Her heart felt wide open. "Am I dreaming still?" she asked. He smiled. "Yes. And no. Then what happens when I wake? You'll carry this place with you. Not like a memory, but like breath." She closed her eyes. The garden around her pulsed. Not with urgency, but with a deep, ancient calm. As if the world itself was sighing in peace. The falling stars slowed. The sky grew still. And Mara, with the cloud keeper beside her, drifted gently into sleep, wrapped in the quiet rhythm of skies that never end. The Chamber of Echoes. Mara awoke not with a start, but with a stillness so deep it felt like silence had taken form around her. The sky had dimmed to a soft indigo, and the stars that had once drifted down now hovered midair, motionless, glowing gently, like tiny lanterns suspended in thought. The cloud keeper stood quietly, watching the sky as though reading it like an ancient book. "This way," he said, without turning. Mara rose and followed him. Her steps were lighter now, softer, not because the path had changed, but because she had. Something inside her had let go. The weight of needing to understand had drifted off like mist. They walked through a corridor of trees whose bark shimmered with reflections. Not of faces, but of moments. Each trunk held glimpses of the world, a child gazing out a rainy window, an old man planting seeds alone, a woman painting spirals in the sand. Lives, feelings, hopes. Tiny echoes of people who had dreamed quietly in the dark. And then they arrived. It wasn't a room, not exactly. It was more like a vast, open chamber carved into the clouds themselves. A great hollow of memory and sky. In the center stood a massive structure, spiraling upward like a seashell, its surface made of woven starlight and root. "The Chamber of Echoes," whispered the cloud keeper. Mara stepped forward. Her fingers brushed its surface, and instantly, sound bloomed around her, soft, layered voices overlapping like a lullaby played backward. They weren't loud. They didn't shout. But they were everywhere. The voice of a scientist whispering her last theory to the stars. A child laughing as he named clouds from his bedroom window. The gentle hum of someone falling asleep, holding a question in their heart. "These are the lost thoughts," the cloud keeper said. "The ones that weren't written down. The ones spoken only in dreams." Mara closed her eyes and listened. It was beautiful. Not polished. Not perfect. But real. Honest. Human. Tears welled in her eyes, not of sadness, but of recognition. Of knowing, finally, that no dream was ever truly lost. No whisper unheard. No wonder wasted. "All of them came here," she whispered. He nodded. Every quiet question. Every longing that looked to the stars and didn't find an answer, came here, to rest. To echo. She stepped deeper into the chamber. As she did, something within her stirred. Not a memory, but a presence. Like a forgotten note returning to its melody. There it was, her voice. Not spoken aloud, but felt. It was the dream she'd had as a child. The one she'd forgotten. Of floating islands, of sky gardens, of stars that listened back. She had thought it was just imagination. But here, in this soft hollow of starlight and echoes, she realized. It had always been waiting. It had always been true. The cloud keeper gently touched her shoulder. "It's time," he said. "For what?" she asked. "To remember. The sky remembers you." The stars began to drift again, slowly at first, like a gentle exhale from the sky itself. The chamber of echoes softened behind her, folding into the mist as Mara followed the cloud keeper to a final archway woven from silver roots and quiet light. On the other side was not a garden or a path, but open sky. A place that felt like a memory and a beginning at once. She stepped through. There was no ground beneath her feet. Just soft wind and starlight. But she didn't fall. Instead, the clouds held her, cradling her like they knew her name. Before her, the sky stretched endlessly. But this was not the vast emptiness she once feared. It pulsed with presence. With color. With stories. The Cloud Keeper turned to face her, his cloak rippling like fog in the breeze. Mara, he said softly, every journey must come to its quiet end. But endings here are never a closing. They are an unfolding. She looked around at the glowing mist, the stars that blinked like sleepy eyes, the shapes of floating forests far below that had sheltered her, taught her, healed her. I thought I came here to learn, she said. You did, he replied. But not just from books. You learned from dreams. From stillness. From letting go. She nodded, and for the first time, her heart didn't feel full of questions. It felt full of sky. The Cloud Keeper raised his hand, and a warm light swirled around her fingers, tiny firefly-like motes that gently rose into the night. They are your echoes now, he said. You've added to the chamber. Your wonder is part of the world. And then, he began to dissolve. Not vanish. Just blend, into wind, into cloud, into all the soft things that held the sky together. Mara watched him go, tears catching in her lashes but not falling. She wasn't alone. She had the stars. The memory of trees that whispered secrets. The dream of a garden that floated. And the quiet certainty that somewhere, someone else would dream too. And they'd find their way here. She laid back onto a soft wisp of cloud, letting it carry her upward. No more searching. No more worrying. Only rest. As her eyes drifted closed, the sky gently whispered to her. The world is wide, but it remembers you. Even your softest dream becomes a light in someone else's sky.